Hi, it's Brian. This episode of Illusion will be a little different from the ones you've been hearing so far, and that's because new scripted stories arrive on the first and third Tuesday of every month. This month has 5 Tuesdays, so I wanted to give you something extra, and I'll get back to that in just a moment. But first, I also wanted to say thanks. Illusion is just getting off the ground, and the response has been very encouraging so far. So thank you for subscribing, for telling a friend, leaving a review, and following me on social media. And if you haven't done any of those things yet, I'd love it if you would. They're all quick and painless ways to show your support. Subscribe wherever, however you get your podcasts, and search for Illusion Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. It really makes a big difference in helping more people to discover the show, and it keeps me motivated to continue bringing you new stories. Also, this bonus episode is presented in partnership with Backyard Media Company, and with the help of my new friends at Helix. Helix offers something that doesn't exist in any other mattress retailer: a completely customized mattress, personalized to your unique preference and sleep style that won't set you back thousands of dollars. Go to helixsleep.com/illusion and take their simple 2 to 3 minute sleep quiz. They'll use your responses to design and build a completely personalized mattress just for you. Think about that. The mattress you get will be custom made based on your unique needs for a good night's sleep. The result, the most comfortable mattress you'll ever sleep on. And by the way, Helix can help you even if you share your bed with a partner, like a lot of us do. To find out how, the first step is to take that 2 to 3 minute sleep quiz. Go to helixsleep.com/illusion right now and you'll get $50 toward your custom mattress. Now, back to business. In this episode, I'd like to share with you a conversation I had recently with the magician Kayla Drescher. If you're a fan of the show Penn and Teller Fool Us, like I am, you may recognize that name. Kayla appeared in the first episode of the current season, and I'll post a link to her performance in the show notes for this episode at illusionpodcast.com. Because her performance was so charming, and so endearing, and so lovely in every way, you just have to check it out if you haven't yet. Kayla and I talked about how she got her start, her career in magic, her performance on Fool Us, and some of her thoughts about illusion. I really enjoyed talking to her, and I know you'll enjoy listening. So, here's my conversation with Kayla Drescher. How did you get interested in magic?
I first started doing magic. I was 7 years old. At that time, I had already been pretty involved in various performing arts and dance, theater, and as much acting as a second grader can do in a small town in Connecticut. And so my dad and I we were on a small road trip, and we stopped at a magic shop. And I walked in, and it really, magic just sort of clicked in my brain because it was so entertaining, but also it was something about the world that I didn't understand. I was always that little kid that asked why about everything and wanted to know how and why and what, how everything worked and why it worked and what needed to be fixed to make it work differently. And that was just sort of how my brain naturally worked. So when I saw a man behind the counter at a magic shop cut a piece of rope and put it back together, I was immediately fascinated and had to know how it was done and why, and then how I could do it and entertain people just as I had been entertained. So I learned, the man taught me, I took lessons from him, and I performed at my school's second grade talent show, and then I've been doing it ever since.
It's interesting that magic is a pretty common hobby for children, but obviously it's less common in adults. And I wonder if it goes back to that thing you were talking about, is that sort of wonder and the need to know. Are magicians people who retain that sense of wonder and need to know into adulthood?
That's a really good question. I think yes and no. I think as I become older, I'm experiencing now, especially while watching magic, that I understand how it works, and I then can just appreciate the performance and the emotion that the performer makes me feel, even though I know how the trick is done. It actually allows me to probably appreciate art and performance art a lot more, because although anybody can recite a Shakespeare monologue, but the way they do it is going to make you feel differently depending on the performer and the situation put around that performer. So for me, it's sort of, I already know every word of that monologue, but can certainly appreciate how the performer performs it. So I think in a way we still do retain a sense of, how do we make this be entertaining? And of course, we're always thinking, okay, well, I want to make a picture appear in a picture frame and never go near the picture frame. Oh, okay, I have to figure out how that works. So there's always the element of like posing challenges to ourselves and creating things around those challenges and setting goals and attempting to accomplish them. So I think in a way, yes, I think we just start to learn the basics. We learn the Newton's laws of magic, and therefore we can kind of take an experiment past that.
What you just described makes me wonder, as a magician who performs and understands how it's all done, has something been taken away from you when it comes to magic? Can you still be amazed?
I think we can still be amazed. The question comes down to with what and how many times. I think that as a kid, you see this magic, and of course, you have no idea how it's working. So that sense of wonder is very specific. And as an adult, because I understand how a lot of magic works, sure, seeing a card trick is not as impressive to me as it would have been when I was 7 years old. Like I said, it's just the difference of appreciating a different part of the performance.
I remember as a child performing magic tricks for adults, and of course they would feign astonishment, and I think even as a child you pick up on that to some level, like they're kind of playing along. But for you, there must have been a moment where you knew that you really did astonish somebody, and I wonder what that felt like.
The first trick I ever learned was a pretty complicated cut and restored rope effect, or it was complicated for me at that age. So I think performing that, looking back on the video of me performing in my second grade talent show, my dad and I wrote some very silly comedic bits where I made fun of my dad for being bald and old and whatever else. And so the laughter from the audience was a really strong moment for me. And I loved that moment. It wasn't maybe so much that I was looking for people to go, oh, wow, I don't know how she did that. I think from a young age, I was really interested in making people smile and making people say, okay, well, I might have known how that was done, but you said a couple of really funny things that made me laugh. And I thought that was more impressive. And that has certainly carried into my professional performance career, where although you might be able to, if you sit and watch it over and over again, figure out how a trick or two of my show is done, I'm more interested in your emotional reaction to things.
And you went to Magic Camp, didn't you? What was that like?
I did. So Magic Camp was this week-long summer camp. It was a sleepaway camp, and it's for kids between the ages of 11 and roughly 20, 21 years old. It's called Tannen's Magic Camp in near a little bit outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And for me, camp came at a time where I was sort of becoming disinterested in magic. I was 15 years old, going into high school, trying to figure out what I wanted to do it was always what do you want to be when you go to college? What do you want to study in 3 years when you go off to school? And so I was trying to figure everything out. So I was lucky enough that the Society of American Magicians, which is a big magic organization, awarded me a scholarship to camp. And that's when my love of close-up magic developed. At that point, I had been doing only stage magic and very little close-up. And I took the close-up class at camp, and I just kind of really fell in love with the intimate connection that magic allows you to have with anywhere between 1 and 30 people. So I started developing my close-up chops because of camp. But overall, camp is just such a great place to go because you work on not only learning tricks, but there's a competition, and there are performance classes and creativity classes and all this stuff that really helps foster your magic skill, but also just helps you become a person. And it's a safe place for kids to be who they are and love what they love, do what they do, and just be in a safe place with no judgment and feel like they can be whoever they are at that time. And it's fun to then go back now. I go back as a counselor, and it's fun to go back now and see kids grow from being, what maybe they would be considered as a really dorky, doofy kid at school who does magic and wears a t-shirt with a moon on it every day of his life. And there are those kids, to then growing up into this amazing adult that still loves the moon and still loves magic, but is like now a competent, really amazing performer and person. And it's really fun to see that happen.
When you were just getting started, who were your role models?
At the time when I was first getting started in magic, I was lucky enough to find a gentleman who would be my mentor for most of my young magic profession. And his name was Bill Andrews from Stamford, Connecticut. And he, at the time we met when I was about 7, he was almost 80 years old. So there was a big age difference. But for some reason, he was like, "You're a cool kid, Kayla. Why don't you, I would like to help you." He ran the Society of Young Magicians, which is a group that met once a month in Connecticut. And there are these groups all over the world, but this particular one in Connecticut was where I learned how to, every month we were there performing for people and performing for each other, learning a new skill, practicing our acts. So he was my biggest inspiration and mentor because he just knew so much. And I just wanted to sort of absorb as much as I could from him because he was such a wealth of knowledge and performance expertise. Of course, watching magic on TV, there was a gentleman, and I'm still not sure who this guy was. I've never been able to find him, but he was on the Disney Channel, and he did these little magic excerpts in between Disney shows that he would teach you how to do a magic trick. So I just love seeing magic on television. I was like, hey, I know that. That's so fun.
Well, speaking of magic on television, let's talk about your appearance on Fool Us.
Yeah, for sure. It was such a positive experience. I think overall, everyone on the staff was so supportive and kind, wonderful. I had submitted for the last 3 years or 3 seasons. And last year I had submitted something and it just wasn't going to work for the show. So this year when I submitted The Heart, I was like, all right, I feel really good. And I'm luckily they liked it and it made it to air. But the whole experience of being in Vegas and working with the magic consultants really was just a great experience. I tell the story, and this is a totally true story, is that I was not nervous at all. And I was in Vegas for 5 days, and I was just in my head going, all right, I just got to do this. Like, I got to practice. And I would practice, and I'd do it 50 times a day. And so I would practice. Great. Go to bed, wake up, eat, practice, have a meeting with the producers. Great. Practice. And it was just that for 3 or 4 days total. And then I filmed. And when I got out onto stage, I was just like, all right, cool. The chairs go here. Great. I'm ready to go. Everything's in the place it needs to be. And then I looked up and I saw an audience and I saw Penn and Teller. And I just looked at everyone and was like, I forgot y'all were going to be here. I'm so sorry. Like, okay, great. I'm not nervous. Okay, everything's fine. And I saw my friends and I started just doing this goofy dance with my shoulders that I do that makes me laugh, which in turn makes everybody else laugh at me. And Penn started dancing with me, so from his seat. So that was just a really fun moment. And so we're all just kind of hanging out. And I performed, and it was great. And as soon as I perform, they hand you a T-shirt, and then they politely ask you to leave the theater because they don't want you to influence any of the other performers, which is a very fair thing. They don't want you to go, hey, all the performers, I fooled them. And then all the performers are like, oh my God, now I'm nervous. So it's a very smart decision on their part. So they just politely escort you out and say, thank you so much. See you later. And I get up to my room and I'm just so happy. I'm so happy with all the comments and just the positive performance with Teller that was just utter perfection from his point. And I got up to my room and I called my dad. And then I just kind of took this big breath and was like, cool, we did it. Feeling good. Oh, nope. I'm going to go throw up. And I threw up. And I realized in that moment that I had been incredibly stressed out. I had no idea. And then my friends and I all went to a celebratory Indian buffet dinner. So it was just a really great experience.
One of the things I've noticed about the show is that the performers are likely to fool 95% of the people watching. Whether they also fool Penn and Teller, I really don't care. It doesn't add anything to the experience for me, and it's not like this is American Idol where if someone wins, they're going to come back the next week. Was it important to you to try to fool Penn and Teller?
For me personally, especially with this routine, I had no intention of fooling them because I knew at its core, it's a torn and restored piece of paper. And as magicians, we all understand the general basics of how that trick works. if I wanted to be incredibly nitpicky, which I didn't want to, I had prepared for them to ask me any question. So if they said, I want to see the inside of your purse, they could, and they wouldn't have found any evidence of how the trick was done. If they looked at my hands at the end of the routine, my hands were empty. So I had prepared for a lot of the opportunity for them to say, we think you know how we think we know how it's done, but we want to confirm. Can we see this? And I could then show them whatever they wanted to see, and they would not find evidence of what they were thinking. So I was prepared, and at the same time, I really don't care, and I still don't. I'm just so happy to have done this piece, and for me, it was about the experience of performing a piece I perform very, very often, and I have for the last 2 years, to perform it with the world's greatest performing partner. Normally, when I perform this routine, it's at a corporate event or at a really fun variety show around Los Angeles. And you never know who you're going to call up. I have a story where I did this one corporate event, and I called up the CEO of the company, and in the tearing of the paper, he took all the pieces of paper and shoved them in his mouth. And I said something sarcastic, as I usually do, and we continued on with the trick. But you just never, and it wasn't funny, it was disgusting, and he was a little bit drunk, and you just never know who you're going to call up. Or you could call up somebody who has no reaction whatsoever, and you just, because either they're nervous or they're not a reactive person, and that's totally fine. But you never know what you're going to get when you call up an audience volunteer. And with Teller, I was prepared for him to be terrible, because that's just, I think, what I'm ready for with any volunteer. It had nothing to do with him, and I was just prepared to be ready for nothing. And there was a moment right in the beginning of the trick where I could see it click on for him that he knew what was going on. And then I realized that we were like driving the bus together, and it was like, oh, cool, here we go, onward. And so then we got to have a lot of fun, and we got to play with each other, and we could have just ended everything right after he left the stage. I could have just walked off and been like, thank you all for having me. You don't need to say anything. Goodbye. That was easily the best thing I could have asked for.
What really struck me about the piece you performed is that it didn't feel like I was watching a trick where a piece of paper is torn and then restored. When I see a trick like that, as fun as it may be to watch, the question is always, why would that even be happening in the first place? And with your piece, I felt like I was watching a story where a relationship is forming and then crumbling and then being magically restored. And the fact that you used paper to achieve that is almost irrelevant. You could have used some other kind of illusion to get the same feeling because the story was so strong. Is storytelling a big part of how you create your material?
Yes, for sure. And thank you so much for your kind words. Everything you just said is my goal at the end of performing. That's what I want everybody to say, where it's like, yeah, the trick was really cool. Maybe I didn't know how you did that, but I felt something. And I reading the comments online, the positive ones anyway, some people are like, I actually cried a little bit, or there was one person that was like, I just got out of a relationship and this hit me so hard, but like made me happy at the end of it too. And that's what I want with what I'm performing. And when I go to create a new routine, or when I learn a new piece of magic, my automatic thing is, all right, how do I make this important? How do I make the audience want to watch this? And then how do I make them remember it at the end? Because as Penn said, and as you just said, any magician could pick up a newspaper, tear it, put it back together. Same with a piece of paper, same with a tissue. Any magician can do that, but not every magician can make you feel something or make you remember that. And at the end of it, if somebody just saw a magic show, and one of the things I like to listen to is at the Magic Castle here in LA, because there are so many different magic shows happening in one night. I like to ask people, who did you see perform? And a lot of times I'll get sort of this answer. Well, we saw this one person perform in this room, and they did some really cool card tricks. But then we saw Steven, and he traveled back in time, and their recollection of the routine of the show is so much more detailed and prevalent, where they're saying, well, I could have seen any card trick, but I saw this one performer do this one specific thing that really got me. And so my goal is that I want people to walk away knowing my name and knowing that I did something. And if they were to explain it back to their friends, there's nobody else in the world that's doing something like I'm doing.
Hey, there's more to come in my conversation with Kayla, but first, I want you to try something. Tell a friend or family member that you need help moving a sofa up a flight of stairs. Or assembling a sofa, the kind that come with a hex wrench and those cartoon instructions. That look of panic on their face? Yeah, that's why I'm glad that another new friend of mine is Burrow. Burrow is the brand behind the most clever, comfortable sofa designed for your life and living room. They do some pretty clever stuff. You know how your couch always blocks at least one electrical outlet, and how it's awkward to reach behind it just to plug something in? Well, Burrow sofas have integrated USB ports, so it's easy to stay charged up. And Burrow sofas are made with the same high-quality materials as Pottery Barn and other high-end retailers, incorporating sustainably sourced North American hardwoods and naturally stain-resistant chemical-free fabrics. And they're modular, which means moving them is a walk in the park. No more broken backs, no more fear of stairs, and no more scuffs on the wall. They're shipped right to you in compact boxes and set up as a breeze. It takes less than 10 minutes with absolutely no tools. And if all that weren't enough, you can have a Burrow sofa for less than half the price of other designer sofas. Visit burrow.com to see what it's all about and use promo code ILLUSION at checkout to get $50 off your order. Okay, now back to my conversation with Kayla. I know that your website is Magic in Heels, and so is your Twitter handle. And what that says to me is that, at least to some degree, you're presenting yourself to the world as not only a magician, but a female magician. So how is it different to be a magician as a woman?
Oh, that's a good question. And I feel like I've answered it 1,000 times. And I always try to come up with something new for the answer to just sort of explain it. To kind of backtrack slightly, I chose my business name because from a business perspective, I had to differentiate myself in a Google search. And so as I'm going through and trying to choose my business name, and if I look at other magicians' business names, there's Black's Magic, there's White's Magic, there's Vegas Corporate Magician. My biggest influence, Christian and Catalina, they have a really great name, which is Married to Magic, the number 2, because they are married and they both do magic. And so I thought that was I was like, oh, this says everything I need to know about them in a very short amount of time. And one day I just was like, oh, Magic in Heels. Duh, let's do that. And bought the handle and started the process of the website. And then I realized that I hate wearing heels. And why did I choose this? And oh my goodness, what a terrible decision. But it really does differentiate myself in a Google search. It certainly shows when you're seeing all these kind of generic magician names go by, and then you see Magic in Heels, there's something eye-catching about that name. And so people are very quick to click on it, which is very helpful business-wise for me. But I do not refer to myself as a female magician. And the reason is I feel that saying female magician automatically puts me and all other women who perform magic in this box that then says, well, you're a really good female magician, but you have no chance on being a good magician. And comparatively, we can put you in a contest against other women for a booking, but we can't put you in contest against other men because you're just not good enough. And I've experienced that a lot in the magic community and in the entertainment industry in general. I've been told many times that I should quit because women cannot perform solo acts, or they can't be funny, or they can't do magic, they can't do sleight of hand, whatever it is. And it just is a very frustrating experience of one that I just attempt to not participate in and instead very much do the opposite of what everyone's thinking. So I very much gear my performance towards saying, well, I can do whatever the heck I want and not, my gender plays no role. And I try to make that as prevalent as possible and just say I'm going to lead by example versus lead by talking about all the reasons I will never be good. And I see a lot of women in the magic community do that to themselves. And I see a lot of men in the community do that to women. And so it's a very frustrating experience. The only time I've ever found that my gender plays a role is when people have hired magicians in the past and are going, well, we've hired magicians and they're all very generic guys. We want something really cool and different. So we're going to hire you. One of the selling points to hiring you is that you are not a guy in a top hat and cape.
It's easy for me to understand why people like watching magic tricks because it's entertaining, it's mystifying, but I think maybe the more interesting question is, what is this doing for the performer? What is it like to be the person on the other side of all of that? Why do you continue to perform illusions? What does that do for you?
My main goal in performing anything I perform is to just make people happy or make them feel an emotion. I don't like to approach a magic performance making it feel like this is a trick or a challenge to the audience. I don't like to be challenged, especially mentally. I don't like when people will be like, I can do this math problem, but you can't. I don't want to play that game. And so I don't want to make my audience play that game either. I think a lot of magicians approach magic that way, and it's very frustrating to me because I see the frustration for the audience to experience a challenge versus an experience. We watch movies and we read books because we like to go on an adventure, or we like to pretend we're going on an adventure, or we physically go, we go camping, hiking, we do things because we like stories and we like an emotional arc. And that's what I try to do with magic is I just really love to entertain people, and I love people to be happy, and I love for them to, want to talk to me at the end of the show and tell me how entertained they were and how it felt like they were at a movie or reading a book or on an adventure. I think that's really cool. But selfishly, I really like that type of attention. I don't like to be the center of attention. I'm often the one in the back of the room because I'm an introvert, like most magicians. Shocker. But I think for me, I want people to be like, yes, she made me entertained. And I love that type of attention where people are like, thank you for entertaining me. And I will love to kind of go on that experience with the audience. So selfishly, it makes me happy to make people happy. And that's mainly why I do what I do and why I focus on performing magic the way that I do, because I think it's the most fun for both me and the audience.
One of the reasons I started this show is because I've always been fascinated with the idea that our world is just full of illusions that we experience almost every day in art and architecture and fashion and film and, of course, stage magic. It seems like experiencing illusion is almost a fundamental part of what it means to be human. It's almost like we need it. Speaking as a magician, why do you think that is?
I think reality is boring. I think monotony is boring. I think as someone who very briefly had a 9-to-5 job, I was bored out of my mind. And I think, because reality is often monotonous, it's often the same all of the time. We want to have a moment where we can say, all right, well, we can't, like right now, I can't lift off from the ground and fly. But you know what? I really want to. So I'm going to go on the Soarin' ride at Disneyland, and it genuinely feels like I'm flying over California. Or I wish that I could breathe underwater like a fish. So I'm going to go scuba diving, or I'm going to go to this movie where it's underwater, or whatever it is. And I think because we are so limited as a species, right? Like we can't fly, we can't breathe underwater, we can't grow 10 feet tall and eat the leaves off the top of trees. Like there are so many things we can't do, but because we are so intelligent, we can see that those things are possible. We see birds, we see giraffes, we see fish, that we're just like, well, wait, I can't do that, but I want to. And so we're going to get as close as we can to having that experience. I look forward to the day where I skydive because I'm obsessed with flight, and I'm sad that I can't. And believe it, when I was a kid, I would try, as I would just bend my knees and attempt to fly. And it resulted in maybe not so many good moments for my physical being, but I tried really hard. And I think that was just because I could see everything, I could see birds flying and I could see airplanes, that I was like, I want to do that. And I can't. So the first time I ever went on the Soarin' ride at Disneyland, I cried because I was so happy, because I was like, this is what it feels like. So that's sort of why I think changing your reality, either with a movie, a book, a television show, now the whole thing is virtual reality and augmented reality experience, where you are in reality, but you've got these glasses on that are allowing you to see things so differently than what you normally see, but just with a pair of glasses. That we're obsessed with that because we're moving through our reality space, but seeing something totally different. And I think that because we are such an intelligent species and we can see so much of the world through the things that we've created, that we want to understand everything. And we don't just want to go to work and type on a computer for 40 hours a week. We want to do really cool things and have fun stories and experiences and thrills. And I think that that's really important to human beings. And that's what hopefully magic can do sometimes, is make you think that although you're in reality, you're seeing something that isn't possible, but might be. And it might be happening in front of you. It shouldn't be, but it totally is. And so for a moment, reality doesn't matter and anything can happen.
If you want to know more about Kayla, find her on Twitter at magicinheels and at magicinheels.com. And if you like these bonus episodes where I interview interesting people, let me know. My plan was to release them on months that have 5 Tuesdays, but maybe I'll do them more frequently if you like them. You can reach me at illusionpodcast@gmail.com or on Twitter at illusionpodcast. In fact, let me know any thoughts you have about the show. If you have ideas for future topics, feedback, whatever. I love hearing from people, and I try to respond to every message. And I hope you'll join me in the next episode for an all-new story of illusion.